equals preload and then load the inventory.tres. Next, we need to have a function called getDragData. This function takes a position, but I don't use this position. So I just put an underscore at the start so we don't get a warning there. We're just going to do pass for now. And we need another function, can drop data. Also takes a position that I'm not going to use. Also takes data. We will be using that. Pass. And finally, we'll have a drop data function. And this will take a position that we won't use and a data that we will use. Looks good, right? These are functions built into Godot inside of the control nodes, and you can actually look them up in the documentation if you want to read a little bit more about them. I'm going to show you how to use them and kind of explain them in this video, but there is, it might be good to kind of supplement the video with the documentation. Might give you a better idea of how everything's going to work. So first, let's do can drop data, because this is the easiest one. This tells Godot whether this UI, this control node can accept drop data. Okay? And drop data is usually passed as a dictionary. I don't think it has to be actually, but I usually do a dictionary. That's kind of what they show in the documentation. So we'll say return data is dictionary and data dot has item. So this function will return true, telling Godot that this can accept drop data if the data is a dictionary and the data has an item in it. So we know that the drop data is for an item. Pretty easy. Now let's do our drop data right here. This is the function that actually drops the data into our control node. So we'll say var my item index. We'll start by getting our own index. Var, well, let's not handle dropping the data until we gather it. Even though getting the drag data is a little bit more complicated, I do want to do it first because then the drop part will make more sense. So first we need to get an item index for the current inventory slot we're on. So that we can just use get index. This is actually the index of the inventory slot relative to the others here, but it corresponds with the index in our inventory. It'll be the same one. Once we do that, we can get the item. Inventory dot remove item index. Now remember how our remove item actually returns the item out? We're going to store it here now. We're removing it from the inventory and storing it inside of this variable. If item is item, that's essentially a check to make sure that it's not null. If this is null, then we don't want to do anything with it. Var data. We'll create an empty dictionary here. And we'll say data.item equals item. So that will create a new key in our dictionary, and it will store the item in that key, which then makes this work right here because it will have an item. Data.item index. Now we also want to remember the index that the item was in, and that's going to be the index that we just got it from right here. And we're remembering that in case we accidentally drop this item somewhere else, we can return it back to where it was before. So that's going to be in our data too. Now you could just return data here, but it wouldn't show anything when you were dragging the item around. The mouse would just be, the item would be there, but it wouldn't visually show anything. So how are we going to visually show something? Well, there's a function called setDragPreview, and we're going to use that, but it takes a control node as an argument that will be dragged around in the room. So we'll have to create one, and we'll use a texture rect for this. So var drag preview equals texture rect dot new. So create a new texture rect. Drag preview dot texture equals item dot texture. Since we have access to the item here, we can grab its texture and make that the drag preview texture. And then we can call set drag preview, pass in the drag preview. Okay, so we get our item, we make sure it's an item, we create some data, it gets removed from the inventory, right? Then we set a drag preview. This all should be working. Our drop data isn't going to be working, but we can test that we can grab it. You can see we can now grab that. It just doesn't work when we try and drop it. Nothing happens. So let's get our drop data. Or let's do our drop data for handling when the item gets dropped. We'll need an item index again. So this is when we're clicking on an inventory slot. This is when we're dropping an item back onto an inventory slot. So we're going to get our own item index. We're going to say we're going to get our item too. And then we're going to swap items with the item, with the data. Basically, my item index and data dot item index. So what is this doing? This is taking the data's item index, which is where the item that we picked up, where that was before, right? So let's say we pick up a sword. Now there's nothing there. It's null. But maybe we have an item here, or maybe we're null. It doesn't actually matter. We don't care. But let's say we have an item here, like we have a potion. This is going to put that potion where the sword was. And it's going to take the null spot and put that right here. So now we'll be left with a null spot. And I can show you this actually, how this looks. So if we take this shield and we try and drop it on this sword, what's going to happen is it's going to swap this spot with this spot. So this will become null and this will become a sword. And you can see that happened. So we swap the null spot with the sword spot. We swap their locations. And the shield just got forgotten about. And that's not what we want. We want to put the shield here. So that's what we have to do next. We have to say inventory dot set item and then we call my item index and data dot item. So my item index is the place we're dropping it to, right? Not the place that we got it from. And we'll set it to the item that we have from the drop data. Now if we run, we can see that it now swaps them properly. There you go. Now this doesn't have item stacking. We can't stack these potions. We can't stack these shields. That's a feature that I might want to explore in another video. So we have, you know, a number that displays how many there are. Now there's a bug here, which is if we drag this out into space here, it just gets destroyed. And the solution that I came up for fixing this was to have our inventory container also kind of smart about catching data that gets dropped in it. So this takes up the whole screen, right? The inventory container. So we're going to give it a script, and we'll give it two functions. Well, we'll give it access to the inventory. To the script, right? We have our inventory container also kind of smart about catching. Basically, remove from the inventory, right? Then we set a